President Xi Jinping is in Malaysia now as part of his state visits to Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam and Cambodia. During the trip, China looks to strengthen economic ties, boost connectivity, and deepen regional cooperation and integration. Ahead of the visits, President Xi Jinping underscored the importance of building a community of shared future among neighboring countries. And this is what President Xi intends to do, especially in Malaysia, which hosts this year's ASEAN Chairmanship. So how does China's neighborhood diplomacy align with the concept of building a community of shared future with neighboring countries? What steps are China and ASEAN countries taking to defend the global multilateral trading order, especially given Washington's recent tariff blitz? Welcome to this special edition of The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined from Hong Kong by Professor Cheng, founding director of the Center on Contemporary China and the World at the University of Hong Kong. From Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, by Professor Nguyen Thanh, faculty member of Fulbright University of Vietnam. And from Malacca, Malaysia, by Peter Cheng, research associate of Malaysia-China Friendship Association. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. First of all, let's talk about some concepts here, and bear with me. This may sound boring, may sound difficult and abstract, but it is very important because China lay out its policies and diplomatic strategies according to these important concepts. Professor Lee, let me go to you. As I mentioned, just ahead of the visit, basically last week, President Xi reiterated the importance of building a community of shared future with neighboring countries. Why is that? And exactly what does that concept mean for neighboring countries of China, especially in Southeast Asia?
Well, the concept is not boring and certainly not abstract. In light of recent development, it's clearer ever than before. And particularly in contrast to what's going on in today's world, you see that on the other side of the Pacific, in the previous administration talk about the two-block narrative, talk about authoritarian versus democracy. That narrative certainly proved to be wrong. But now the Trump administration talk about unilateralism, American hegemony, American isolationism, and protectionism. So China provide a contrast with that broad concept. Talk about regional integration, economic cooperation, and the peace and prosperity for common development, and also the concept of the collective security. So I think that that concept resonates very well in this part of the world.
Exactly what kind of difference will it make on the ground, Mr. Lee? I'm staying with you here. And how receptive will neighboring countries be to this concept?
I think that China's Belt Road Initiative certainly wanted to try to extend China's own success for transportation, whether we by sea or inland, and to also share that development with other ASEAN countries, which now whether it be road, seaport, and other kind of development. This is also echo what Larry Summers, the former Secretary of Treasury of U.S., said that when U.S. gave countries, whether ASEAN country or other country, a lesson, China want to build airport. So that's the spirit. But also talk about inclusive growth, mutual respect, and diversities, respect diversity, because this region with different religion, different history, different political system, and etc. So the shared destiny talk about the common challenges to reduce the differences, enhance the commonality. That's the spirit. That's the very detailed, very specific policies. I think that certainly, I think the country, the region largely welcome that development.
Professor Nguyen, what's the perception and reception of this new concept in Vietnam, the idea that China wants to build a community of shared future for neighboring countries? How is this concept going down with people in Vietnam?
I think the reception is considered to be quite positive in Vietnamese public because they believe that China's contribution to the peace and prosperity in the region is very important. And if we look at the broader picture right now, and we can see that the world is so volatile. And so if China can be instrumental in building like a community of shared future, it's very good for Vietnamese exporters, also for Vietnamese farmers, because now you can see that when we look at the Vietnamese exports of agricultural products to China, and we can see a big jump in recent years. And if China can enhance more cooperation to build a community of shared future between Vietnam and China, also with other regional countries, I think it's very good, and it's lay the foundation for the future cooperation, the future prosperity in the region.
Mr. Cheng, from Malaysia's perspective, China's principle on neighborhood diplomacy has been pretty clear. There are four major ideas: that of amity, that of sincerity, that of mutual benefit, and that of inclusiveness. Now China is promoting this idea of building a community, a shared future with neighboring countries. How do you understand as to the evolution of or elevation of China's understanding of its diplomacy with neighboring countries, including Malaysia?
I echo Professor Lee's opening line. The concept is not boring or abstract at all. The concept is very interesting and very real. We experience it on the ground. It has brought about transformative changes in Malaysia. The BRI, for example, has just celebrated its 10th anniversary. We see how it has transformed Malaysia in many, many ways. And the BRI itself has transformed from just bricks and mortar to digital BRI, sustainable BRI, health Silk Road, education BRI. So this idea of sharing a shared future with the neighboring countries for us here in Malaysia is very real. It's empirical. It is something that is very concrete. We saw the future in China. We saw how China transformed itself. And we thought that could be our future as well. So this concept resonates very strongly for us here in Malaysia, and I believe for the rest of Southeast Asia.
At a press conference on March 7th this year, China's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, talked about neighborhood diplomacy. He said China will continue to open wider to neighboring countries, including through unilateral initiatives, and share more. Remember, this is unilateral initiatives, not unilateral tariffs, and share more development benefits with its neighbors. And that Asia is not an arena for big power rivalry. It should become a demonstration field for international cooperation. Professor Lee, how does this trip by President Xi to the three Southeast Asian countries demonstrate China's diplomacy principles in this regard?
Well, this is another great opportunity for China to enhance its collaboration with the region. ASEAN countries, as we know, is the largest trading partner for China. Actually, Chinese diplomacy shifted a few years ago. United States is not what Chinese leaders said, the emphasis of emphasis. The real emphasis already shifted to ASEAN country and to EU, although US and China still remain as the most important bilateral relationship. But because of domestic situation in the United States and will remain quite problematic for a long time, China put a lot of emphasis on this region. Now, ASEAN, with 700 million people with different political, cultural, economic background, with its own diversity, China wanted to enhance, celebrate the diversity, but also talk about common challenges. The challenges are, on one hand, this is the region, it's the most dynamic economic region, particularly with the rise of middle class. Over the past quarter of century, the size of middle class in this region increased by tenfold, especially in countries like China, Indonesia, Malaysia, and etc. Now, also, this is a region, as we know, maintained precious peace for the past 40 years. Now, look at the preceding 4 decades. This is the most dangerous war-ridden region. So what a great contrast. I think that the Asian Pacific, and especially ASEAN and China, wanted to make a great effort to maintain that region to be peaceful and prosperous. Yeah, so Xi Jinping's visit certainly enhanced that objective. Now, also, there's the cultural messages, because 70 years ago, the so-called Bangkok conference talked about Asia way moving forward, largely successful. It's a celebrate diversity and peace. So it's a great time to celebrate that Asian spirit.
Mr. Lee, let me ask you this question out of curiosity, because actually something is happening between China and Southeast Asian countries, for instance, Vietnam, where many jobs low in the value chain actually have left China and settled, relocated to countries such as Vietnam, such as garment factories. And yet it seems that the way how China has dealt with this kind of loss of jobs or manufacturing differently than some other countries, and it doesn't seem to use the way, for instance, tariff or some other arbitrary means to try to retain these jobs and, stop things from flowing.
Well, absolutely, because actually China and Vietnam can complement each other because in the value chain, they're in different stage. But China is a huge market. It will be very, very important for Vietnam's further development. But on the other hand, that Vietnam is also a very, very important China because of some of the industrial chains or supply chains. China can collaborate with Vietnam in this area. Of course, two countries still have tremendous room to develop in the economic area. But my point is that should be more complementary to each other rather than compete against each other.
Professor Nguyen, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Vietnam. Talk us through the China-Vietnam relationship recently. What have been some of the major breakthroughs and highlights? And what kind of cooperation is Vietnam pursuing with China under the new leadership of To Lam?
If we look back at the history of the relationship between Vietnam and China, and we can see that China is the first country to recognize the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in 1950. And throughout the process of 75 years of bilateral relationship, we can see the two countries have been going through a lot of ups and downs. But in recent years, and we can see that the two countries have reached the elevation of is bilateral ties. And in December 2023, and we could see that President Xi Jinping visited Vietnam, and last year General Secretary To Lam visited China, and now we have welcomed President Xi to visit Vietnam, and we see that the high-ranking visits between the top-ranking officials, the top leaders from both countries, marking the sincerity and the trust between the two countries. And on top of that, we can also see about the investments. Now China is the sixth largest investor in Vietnam in terms of cumulative investments, and is a big jump in investments from China. And if we compare to like around 5 years ago, and China was not in the sixth position, it was now in the league. And besides that, China is now having received more imports from Vietnam and open the market for Vietnam exports. And that also shows the willingness of the Chinese government to have like win-win relationship with Vietnam and for the common prosperity, as President Xi and Vietnamese General Secretary To Lam already agreed upon. And we can see that in terms of trade, investment, and in terms of high-ranking officials visit, and also in terms of dispute resolution in the South China Sea, and we can see a lot of progress between the two countries. In terms of cultural exchange or Vietnamese students in China, and we can see like a big number of Vietnamese students in China right now, a big jump. And Vietnamese students in China is now accounting for the biggest number of ASEAN students in China, around like 23,000 Vietnamese students in China right now. And I think that the cultural exchange and educational exchange is very important for the future relationship between the two countries.
It's great to hear that. Now let's turn to Malaysia, where President Xi is at the moment, and his state visit will last 3 days in Malaysia. Mr. Cheng, why the importance? Why is he spending so much time, and what will be high on his agenda?
Malaysia and China has got a very special relationship. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. We pride ourselves as the first Southeast Asian country to establish diplomatic ties with China in 1974. And for that, I think our Chinese counterparts really appreciate Malaysia's gesture at that time. And that's still our relationship. Our relationship obviously goes back much further to the Ming Dynasty. But the modern relationship has been very strong. And it's underpinned by very basic kind of pragmatism, you know, the ability to stand back and look at the big picture. Sure, we have some differences. Sure, we have some challenges. But the big picture shows that we have a lot more overlapping interests, common good that we could pursue. And leaders of both countries has kept to that strategy or policy and able to step back and work for the common good. And it has bear fruit. Over the last 30, 40 years, we have worked together, shared common purposes, shared future for humanity, shared future for the neighborhood. And this is becoming realized here on the ground. One distinct relationship that Malaysia and China has, and in particular between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, is their common interest in this President Xi's project, Global Civilizational Initiative.
Well, the economic level is in the spotlight as we speak for obvious reason because of the great uncertainty that the Trump administration has bestowed on the world, if that is the correct word. China has been Malaysia's largest trading partner for the sixth consecutive year. Mr. Cheng, do you see China, Malaysia and other ASEAN countries working together, that they have the ability and the will to work together to protect their legitimate rights and interests in terms of trade and economic connectivity?
Absolutely. That is the top agenda issue on the agenda right now as President Xi visits Malaysia and Southeast Asia. How do we collectively shape a coordinated response to the turmoil that has been unleashed upon us from Washington? I think we all need to come together and to find a common ground and common strategy to work together. And I think China's coordinated response agreement with Japan and Korea last month to shape a collective response is a good model to work from. That ASEAN too will want to work together with China to how to mitigate and respond to the great unpredictability and instability that we're in right now.
Mr. Lee, now Malaysia holds the chair of ASEAN this year, and Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has been a strong voice for strengthening regional cooperation, integration and multilateralism. What do you see China and ASEAN doing together, collaborating as the second and fifth largest economies to protect openness, protect multilateralism and to protect the interests of their industries and individual citizens in this phase of global uncertainty?
Well, at the time that the U.S. and the Trump administration launched a trade war against the world, so you cannot emphasize enough the importance of ASEAN country with China. This is a large economic entities, and China's investment in the region, ASEAN country, increased by 20 times over the past 20 years. And the ASEAN country is also becoming one of the most dynamic regions in the world. But also, besides, we talk about the educational exchange with student exchanges. At the time, sounds like the U.S. will reduce foreign students. I think it's also very, very important. Another thing is, as we know, that President Trump also withdrew from Paris Agreement. But I think the ASEAN country and China now also emphasize green development, because this is the region where the ASEAN or China all suffer from the sea level change. And so they pay attention to the importance of clean energy and the climate change. So I think that area, the collaboration, will set a good example for other countries. I think the EU will welcome this development. So I think all these areas with the tourism, now you look at the flights between ASEAN and China, now every week it's about 2,300. The speed increase is very, very, very quick. I think that will compensate some of the loss in terms of U.S.-led protectionism and also reduce tourism and foreign students and foreign economic trade. So I think this will be the most dynamic region in terms of free trade, in terms of economic integration, will be very, very important at this time of uncertainty.
Professor Nguyen, now you mentioned differences that China and countries in Southeast Asia, for instance, Vietnam, still have, and yet that doesn't seem to prevent them from finding the common ground to work with each other. Yet faced with such important shock waves, such grave shock waves from the United States, the world's largest economy, it is inevitable that different countries will have different rhythm and different strategy to react and to respond. Do you think countries such as Southeast Asia, such as Vietnam, will be forced to take sides when it comes to dealing with the different economic relations? Will they be in a difficult position if they want to maintain their relationship with the United States, but also increase their economic cooperation and political and cultural cooperation with China?
I think that Vietnam, as well as other regional countries, is like a small and middle powers in the region, do not want to take sides, and we don't want to get stuck in the power rivalry in the region. I think that a small power or middle power like Vietnam wants to develop cooperation and collaboration with rich powers, and we want to maximize our benefits. And I think that that's the principle of Vietnam. We want the peace and prosperity in the region, and we expect the rich powers like China and the U.S. to behave responsibly in the region. And so that's the reason why China's contribution to the peace and prosperity in the region is highly appreciated by the regional countries. And Vietnam will appreciate that. And I think that now is the time for China to prove that it's a responsible, rich power in the region, and it can rewrite the rules, and it can create some kind of like the community where countries in the region can share the benefits of the win-win cooperation in the region, especially in trade and investment, and the concrete measures and the concrete offerings from China will be welcome from the people in Southeast Asia.
Let's talk about the perception of China in the eyes of Southeast Asian people. According to a survey that's conducted by Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia and the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, the survey is called ASEAN People's Perception Survey. It was done in 2024. From an economic perspective, perceptions of the most beneficial partner for ASEAN growth were led significantly by China at a whopping 44%. Also, in terms of the most relevant partner for the future of ASEAN, China topped the table with 32%. Although, interestingly, China is not viewed as the most trustworthy and reliable partner. Actually, China is viewed as one of the least trustworthy and reliable partner. Mr. Cheng, this is just one such survey. We're not exhausting the list, and we do not know how objective it is, but it does show to me some kind of contradictions here. What do these numbers tell you? Exactly how do people on the ground view the role of China? Does this survey speak more or less to the complicated perception of feelings people in the region are having about their relationship with China?
Well, the perception among Southeast Asian or China, sure, there are certain kind of uncertainties tied to China's presence. There are some challenges that China poses to some of our national interests. But I do not think it is an overwhelming sort of sentiment that China is a untrustworthy partner or unreliable partner. I do not know what is the basis of the survey is, but my own reading of other surveys seems to show contradictory results. There was a lot of evidence on the ground, both on our Malaysian own surveys, that shows that there is a lot of positive reception to China's presence within Malaysia. We feel it on the ground. We can feel it in our day-to-day living, both at a personal macro level and also at a macro and national level. So we consistently see over the past decade or so that China has been a positive presence in our country and in this region.
How do you see China's role going forward, Mr. Cheng? Because some people are actually putting China's visit or the visits by the Chinese president as a way of China to court Southeast Asian for the sake of expanding its regional influence, especially at this perfect time that the United States has created for China. How do you look at it? I mean, these visits were planned way ahead. You know, people wouldn't know when and how ferocious the U.S. tariffs would be coming down.
We always found that China has been very respectful towards ASEAN. There are two principles that underpins ASEAN. One is the principle of neutrality, and the other one is ASEAN centrality. We do not want to take sides, as President Nguyen has already mentioned many times, and we want to have our own sovereignty, ASEAN centrality. Both these two principles, China respects. China never asks us to choose sides. China participate in ASEAN-led summit to play, quote unquote, a junior partner in forums where we lead. China doesn't want to dominate the relationship, and we really respect that, and we appreciate it. And we really see China as indispensable right now for us moving forward. And we appreciate it and visit right this week to Vietnam, and right now in Malaysia, and tomorrow to Cambodia, reinforce that relationship.
Mr. Lee, how do you see the importance of this visit to China? It happened on the heels of the chaos that has been created or self-inflicted by the United States. And yet, as I mentioned, these visits were planned way ahead. Exactly how important is ASEAN and the region for China? Is China thinking of courting countries in the region for its regional ambitions?
Well, first of all, Liu Xing, I want to applaud you and the CGTN for mentioning the survey that certainly this is the area China should make some improvement. This could be misunderstanding or could be rapid change and rapid growing power of China. So naturally, a different country may have different reaction. And also besides that, in terms of soft power, despite the U.S. influence in this area decline, but still probably, relatively speaking, quite strong. So that probably explains some of the survey results. But the fact that President Xi Jinping visited the region showed respect to all these three countries and talk about China's diplomacy, China's the effort to improve well-being in that region, and China's diplomatic approach, as Mr. Chang said, the respect ASEAN's two principles. That will resonate very well. I think with this kind of frequent visit, particularly by head of state, I think the relationship will be improved in the months and years to come. I would believe that after a few years, the survey will be very, very different than the result. Actually, if you compare with a few years ago, you do see improvement in Malaysia, in Singapore, in some of the other countries. But I think that, again, because the whole region is also in a very important transition in many countries, economic and political development. So I think China should be even more sensitive, talk about the inclusive growth on the one hand, in terms of economic development, but at the same time, also talk about the mutual respect. And so I think that President Xi Jinping certainly will do that in his visit in this region.
All right. We have to leave it there. Time has run out, but definitely a very important, a very significant period in history that we're witnessing. Many thanks to my guest, Professor Lee Cheng from the University of Hong Kong, Professor Nguyen Tan from the Fulbright University of Vietnam, and Mr. Peter Chen, Research Associate of Malaysia-China Friendship Association. With that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Beijing. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. You've got The Point.